Come up and do the sword dance. Just kidding.
It can be considered like an open mic, open swords. Anyone's welcome to come up and dance on that at any point this afternoon. Nicola, you know, you teach aerobics, it's really not all that different.
We have quite a number of people we'd like to mention as special guests. We had an appearance briefly by Robbie Burns, but he had to go back to Scotland. But we also had John Horgan. Is that right, Dad? Hogan? Oh, sorry. He's apparently the MLA. What do I know? Not in my constituency. Robert Fraser, the Langford mayor candidate, is here with us today. Thank you for coming. And also Rose Henry, Victoria's first city council candidate of Native ancestry. I think she's here. Are you here, Rose? Woo! And I know that Carl Rusing is going to come.
Maci on the far left here is Ron's god-granddaughter. She's my goddaughter, so therefore it extends.
So the name of this song, you may recognize the song itself, but the song title has changed, altered slightly. The song is called Oh Daddy Oh, the Pipes Are Calling.
Oh, the pipes are calling. Of my older brother are twofold. One of them was when he was about 16, maybe 17 years of age. There were 3 young girls who lived across the track and up the hill, and Ron spent a lot of time in that area. And one day, I'm 4 years younger, so I heard my father say, "Mother, get a hold of that boy. He's not getting any sleep, and he'll end up getting sick." So his mother, I guess, took him aside and said, "Look, if you don't come back when I set the scene, set the time, I'm going to come up in my pajamas and call you home." So Ron didn't believe this. So one day, there's a knock on the door at the 3 houses, and there's Mother in her pajamas, and Mr. and Mrs. McLaughlin, I think their names were, welcomed Mother and congratulated her on the color and texture of her pajamas, and sought out Ron. Ron scurried home with her, and I don't think that Ron ever got sick after that. Never lost his sleep. The other one was a lady from northern Saskatchewan who was a good friend of the parents, and her husband was the head of the fisheries for that province. And they used to come down and stay with us. Well, they're with 5 kids and 2 adults in the house. There was a juggling of beds and bedrooms and so on. The mother's last admonition to Ron was, "Go and sleep in your father's bedroom and climb in there with him." So I guess 2 o'clock in the morning, Ron puts in his appearance and leaps into bed. Thinks that he saw this huge mound in the bed because Dad was about 6'1" or 2" and 220 pounds. And he thought nothing of it. Looked like a familiar mound. And in the morning he awakened early and he saw these long golden hair on this person who supposedly was his father. Anyway, the long of the story of it was that he slipped out of the bed unknown to the lady, but the word got out, if you go to stay at the Macisaac, if you go to Prince Albert, stay at the Macisaacs. Thank you.
Because I was considerably younger than Ron, and I didn't know really what was going on in those days, so my perspective is from a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old. I heard many stories about Ron, that from a very early age he was very entrepreneurial, and he had a rabbit business, and he used to buy, sell, and trade. And when I was about 4 years old, I and all the neighbor kids wanted to pet these rabbits and hold them. And Ron had, I believe, about 100 rabbits at one point in the yard, and he had cages for them all. And so he said to all the little kids in the neighborhood, look, I don't think you really want to do this, or at least, the cages have to be cleaned, and have to gather some carrots from the garden, grass and so on to feed them. So, and he would say to us, he says, you really don't want to do that, do you? And we would say, yes, yes. And all the kids in the neighborhood would say, yes, Mr. Macisaac, because he had taught them when he was 14 or 15 to call him Mr. Macisaac. And so he said, do you really want to do all that work? Yes, Mr. Macisaac, we want to. So Ron was able to get the work done and do a community service. And like Tom Sawyer, he got the fence painted. Now I always recall Ron more when he was coming home for holidays. He would let me drive the car when I was about 11 years old out on the highway. Tell me I had to get it up to speed. And he'd pull out the throttle and we would be going at a terrible speed. But it was pretty exciting, and I kind of liked him for that. So we're proud of Ron's successes. He ultimately went off and graduated from university and came out to Nanaimo and practiced and raised a gaggle of nice kids. And much later, he became prominent as an environmental activist. He wanted to go out and save the planet, after all. I think he would have made his father proud. But I want to tell you now that he was not always a tree hugger. When I was a kid of 6, and I think I was probably in grade 1, I looked out one morning and there was a yard full of Christmas trees. Now the city of Prince Albert in Saskatchewan had a lot of spruce and pine, and they would tag these trees, I believe, and they'd say to families, you can come and get one. But he, who was probably 16, and his brother Alistair, who didn't know any better, went out one evening and cut probably 30 or 40 or 50 trees, and not the scraggly ones the city gave. They were good trees, and they were all pre-sold, by the way, or they were even cut. There was a lot of planning went into this. When I looked out, and then I heard heightened anxiety around the house, I sensed this. They had hired a couple of young native men with a hay rack and horses to come out early in the morning. And they brought these in, and they had to come across the North Saskatchewan River, and there was only one bridge. And there was somebody who spotted this, and they challenged them. Anyway, the trees ended up in the yard. But this created quite a hubbub in the community, and I believe, Alistair, you brought the clippings from the Prince Albert Herald. You still have them.
Still have it. Amazing.
Would you read those out?
Make history, it says here. The local Native Indians deny cutting trees from the public lands. They claim a teenager hired them to haul them. Subsequently, there was a second appearance on the newspaper which read, son of local barrister John J.F. Macisaac, identified as the Christmas tree clear cutter. There you have it.
So Ron was caught red-handed, and my friends, it was a day of infamy for our family. My dad had to save Ron from the dreaded reform school, from the charges of crimes against humanity. And we can't blame Alistair. Alistair was a follower in those days. He wasn't that colonel of the military. And life was never the same after that, was it, Al? Ron got several nicknames that were not the most pleasant. I remember hearing one he was called Triple K or KKK. People wondered what that was. I certainly did. And it stood for Clear Cut Macisaac. Ron ultimately left home. He traveled to British Columbia, where construction was beginning on the Alaska Highway. And the Army personnel officer looked at Ron and said, "You're a pretty young kid." But he realized there was a shortage of manpower in those days. And he said, "Listen, we're building 1,000 miles of highway to Alaska. And we have to cut 1,000 miles of trees." Do you know anything about cutting trees? My brother Ron, who had been despondent for so long because of the shame he had wrought on our family and community, Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, he smiled for the first time broadly in many a month and said, "Sir, they don't call me Clear Cut Macisaac for nothing." And the rest is history. Ron has gone through a major metamorphosis, transformation. In British Columbia, he climbed mountains. I believe he climbed one behind Nanaimo. Was it called Green Mountain, Alistair? And like Dr. Martin Luther King, he said, when he was at the top of this mountain, "I have seen the other side of the mountain. I have seen the promised land. And in that land, there are trees, thousands of trees. And there are men there without axes or chainsaws. And the land is beautiful." And that is our story about Ron. By the way, Ron, I talked to Mom last week, told her I was coming here for your 80th, and she wants to know if you've been to confession. I said I inquired.
person. And I guess I was graduating from high school when Ron arrived at high school. So I'm one of his older confreres from PACI. And of course, Ron and I sat at the same desk in law school for the first year. That was after the war. So we go back a long ways, about 66 years. And then Ron decided to come west to BC because the issue was moved up there. And he arrived in Nanaimo, and my brother Joe went up there, and they joined Frank Ney, and they were called the Three Musketeers. And they were into all sorts of nefarious things besides saving beautiful damsels on turret walls. Now, Ron, of course, was in Nanaimo practicing, doing very well. But by Jove, he had to follow me to Victoria and start picking up a few of my clients too. But he's been a wonderful friend through all the years, going back to his mother and family in the days of Prince Albert when I lived there for 5 years, going through high school. It was wonderful to see Ron on his 80th birthday, and his brothers who were with me at Benticton in late April this year when we had a reunion of the ACI. So all the best to Ron. And I have a special present for you, Ron. Not in the case for this issue. This is like Thanksgiving time. This is called a turkey at law. Herewith, one poised and pompous velour, a turkey at law, with smug demeanor and large typical bill, portable and fits into a pocket, a deep pocket. So this is from Connie and I to Ron. Fun, of course.
Thank you, Foster.
Thank you, Foster. Now we're moving forward in history, as you may remark. I'd like to ask Dad's former legal partner, Jim Vanstone, to please come up and speak.
I thought I'd speak about how I came to practice law with Ron. I lived in Nanaimo from grade 3 to grade 9 and then moved away to Vancouver, eventually going to law school in Edmonton and considering that I'd probably want to practice in Vancouver. Pounded the pavement in Vancouver for several weeks trying to get articles without success. And the sister of one of Ron's former partners was married to a classmate of mine at the University of Alberta who said, well, go to Nanaimo and interview with Ron Macisaac. So I rang ahead and set up an appointment for Wednesday in the summer. I arrived in Nanaimo, stayed in a motel the night before, all excited about this interview, phoned his secretary the next day just to confirm the appointment. And she said, it's summertime. Ron is never in the office on Wednesdays in the summertime. He had a place in those days on Salt Spring Island. So she gave me his number. I rang him up. He said, no problem, come on down. How do I find your place on Salt Spring Island? My daughter Carol's coming down. Give her a ring. So I gave her a ring, and this lovely lady answered the phone and said, have you had breakfast? No, I hadn't. Come on over. She fed me, and then I followed her car down to Salt Spring Island. But before we got there, at the Crofton ferry terminal was another person seeking articles, Kathy Downs, who was to go on to become a Supreme Court judge, and we met there. We got to Salt Spring Island together, having just met, and the first words out of Ron's mouth were, how delightful. The firm is hiring both a male and female student this year. You're both here. Our search is over. Given the dismissive responses we've been getting from the Vancouver firms, this extraordinary greeting was delightful indeed. Little did we know that Ron never had the heart to say no to anybody. And he told every article student who knocked on his door that they had jobs. We should have smelled a rat when he said, as if it were a mere formality, "Well, I guess you just better bounce it off my partners." How, we asked, could we best go about meeting your partners? Whereupon he presented us with several cases of beer, which he'd somehow managed to acquire, notwithstanding a protracted province-wide brewery strike. "Return to Nanaimo," he said. "Leave each with a case of beer. They'll love you forever. You'll have the jobs, no sweat." Kathy and I delivered that beer. Why? I mean, after all, our search for articles was becoming quite discouraging by then, and we were still young. And there we were, 2 law students on Salt Spring Island on a hot August day, in the middle of a brewery strike, with all this cold, liquid treasure. I didn't know at the time, but I know now, Ron would have understood completely if Kath and I had just gone to the nearest beach and drunk it all ourselves. Shortly thereafter, he phoned me up and said, "Jim, you've got the job." And I accepted it, for one reason, out of curiosity. So Ron, next time you're in Nanaimo, I would love to go for a beer with you. And don't worry about a thing. As usual, I'll pay.
I'd like to invite the great beer aficionado and my godfather, Sid Clark, please to come up and say a few words.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to know that I used to be a learned and great aficionado, but my brilliance diminishes with the amount of time I have to prepare for these things. And this time I was just asked right now. So I really could go home. I don't think I'd better do that. After all, Isaac was my partner, Ron was my partner for some 35 years. And I never had an opportunity to have an argument with him the whole time. But the fact is, you know, when he hit Nanaimo, nobody thought he was a lawyer or going to be a lawyer, because he didn't have any family, he didn't have any friends, that's for sure. And he had no place to stay. But Ron knew how to fix that all right. He joined the Nanaimo Fire Department, became an auxiliary fireman. And truly, that's where everybody thought he was going to wind up too, as a matter of fact. He found out that he'd get $15 a week and a place to lay his head. Mind you, then he had to worry about eating. But he worked that out pretty well too, because he managed to get 6 girlfriends over the course of a week, and he didn't have to worry about meals anymore either. He'd go up there for dinner. But I would like to say, Ron, I appreciate the fact that we've had such a long time good relationship. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sid. And at this moment, I'd just like to put out a general invitation to everyone who is here, whose life has clearly been touched, affected, or changed in some way by Ron Macisaac, to come forward and make a little speech if you like, or tell a joke. Looks like I have a volunteer right here. Art Night.
It's so nice to be here today to wish Ron many happy returns on his 80th birthday. I'm going to be 80 in 10 days, Ron, so I know just exactly how you feel. But I have to tell you, there's actually 2 parts to this story, because when I first got to Nanaimo, I had a bad back from the Navy, which I had just come from, and I wound up in the Nanaimo hospital. So I was teasing the nurse. Her name was Barbara Cuthbert. I remember her particularly. And she said to me, "You know, Arthur," she said, "I really got to wheel you down the corridor because you've got to meet this fellow Ron Macisaac. You two would get along fine." So she wheeled me down the corridor at the old Nanaimo General Hospital and wheeled me into Ron's room, and there was Ron, large as life, and he said, "Oh there, Arthur, how are you doing?" I said, "Fine." He said, "What are you drinking?" I said, what do you mean, what am I drinking? So he leaned over into his little cabinet beside his bed and took out an array of bottles and stuck them up on the trolley there that they had. And he said, well, what do you have? So I said, well, Ryan Ginger, I guess. And so he poured me a Ryan Ginger and everything went rosy. So we became very fast friends. And through the years, we have muddled around the Nanaimo plenty, but there's one story that simply has to be told, and that's why I'm here saying it tonight, because we had very dear friends in Nanaimo, all of us, and right across the street from Ron's office was the Modern Cafe, and that was Jimmy Ma's Cafe. And Jimmy Ma, great guy, was bringing his nephew in from China to marry a girl from China. Well, the simple fact was that the bride and the groom couldn't understand each other because they spoke different dialects of Chinese. Well, Ron and I were invited to this reception wedding do down in Henry Wong's in the Rendezvous downtown. And so there was Ron and I, and the only Caucasians in the whole room. It was just absolutely fascinating, because there was toast being given to the bride and toast being given to the groom. And I was getting a little worried because they're going to get to me and I couldn't speak Chinese. And so all of a sudden it came Ron's turn. And this absolute cad, he stood up and he took a piece of paper out of his pocket and then phonetically he gave a speech in Chinese. So that's the only time I've ever seen that done, and that is absolutely remarkable. But I didn't know what to do. I was so embarrassed. So I said to Chuck, Henry Wong, Henry Wong's wife was sitting beside me, you remember that, Henry and Chuck. And I said to Henry's wife, I said, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? She said, it's very simple, Arthur. All you do is stand up and you say, you toast to the bride and groom and hope they have lots of sons. So I stood up and I said, here's a toast to the bride and groom and may you have lots of sons. And neither of them could understand what I said. The only thing they could understand was what Ron had said. So I don't really know what he said. So there you go. That's my story on Ron Macisaac, the only Chinese-speaking lawyer I ever met.
Thank you, Art.
Take all of us kids and all of his kids up to Green Mountain in his, I think it was a green Subaru, or green Suburban, we should say. Anyways, Ron was very entertaining on the ways home, and we'd stop at Dairy Queen, but all along the way, it was such a long ride for us young kids, and he was going with all these great songs, which Ron taught me, and I taught to elementary kids, and they actually, loved them. And Macisaacs, I'd like you to sing along with me. I know you know this, Danny and Liz and Carol, the Three Bears. Are y'all set?
Yeah, we're going to do it up there.
Oh, okay.
All right. Where are they? They're all vanished.
They're all leaving.
We'll have to wait for them to come back.
Okay.
Okay, why don't we take a few minutes, get some food, and come back and do the songs?
And I thought of incredible energy, and it just goes to show with all of you people who are gathered here to join Ron on his 80th birthday that he has an awful lot of friends all over the place. So it's just a brief comment, but I'd like to dedicate justice and honor and love and energy to Ron on his birthday.
Thank you, Bruce. The last person that I know of that I'd like to invite up to speak is Kim Blank. Kim, would you come up and say a few words for us?
Words that come to mind, a few words when I better associate with Ron. Let's see. Tax write-off. Old newspapers. Second-hand pulp fiction. Limericks. Jocelyn. His children. And I want to know, and Ron, I mean from the bottom of my heart, maybe from the bottom of some other bottom. Are you wearing anything under that kilt?
Sounds like we'll never know. Oh, a couple more speakers. Please introduce yourself.
Ron's a great guy. My name is Felix Lyon, and I've known Ron for, 20 years more or less. He's a great guy. He's a guy full of good humor. He's a person loyal and friendly, but I want to add one thing that hasn't really been stressed tonight. Ron is always strong for human rights. Years ago, I thought, kind of stuck with the job of being president of the Vancouver Island Human Rights Coalition. And I carried on as best as I was able for a couple of years. And then somebody found a replacement. And I thought, if we can get him in for a year, I'll escape. We got him in and he stayed with us, and he was always alert for any infringement of any person's human rights. And I worked on the board with him afterwards, and he said, oh, well, we'd grumble about the government, about the provincial leaders and so on. Ron said, I'll write a letter. I'll write a letter to that one. I'll write a letter to this one. And he was a master of, in about 2 sentences, setting a public official straight on his policies. And I think if all of us, good citizens, would follow his example, we'd have a better province quite quickly.
And in 1989, my late father, Peter Hartnell, who was quite a crusty old businessman, if I may say so. I loved him dearly, but we had our differences politically. Somehow managed to convince myself and a bunch of my hippie friends and to get together with Ron to form the Greater Victoria Concerned Citizens Association. It was one of 2 new groups that was formed in an emergency atmosphere of desperation, if I may say so, when the then social credit government of the day had an insane plan to privatize St. Anne's Academy and turn the whole beautiful historical precinct over to one of their developer friends. So Ron helped us form the Concerned Citizens Association. We launched a number of lawsuits. There was another group that was formed headed by the man who subsequently became the NDP mayor of Victoria, David Turner. We kept those developing rascals in the court for quite a number of years, and it frustrated their ability to get money from the banks. And if one lawsuit failed, then the other one we'd hit them with another one. And this went on for years, frankly. It was frustrating, it was maddening, but eventually we won a Pyrrhic victory with no small part played by Ron. He was a key player in those activities, and then subsequently, of course, he wrote or co-wrote the book on the Clayoquot mass trials. A bunch of other similar-minded conservationists went up to Clayoquot Sound about 4 years after the formation of the Concerned Citizens, and we sat on a logging road, almost 900 of us. It was quite a remarkable summer of peaceful civil disobedience activity, and Ron wrote a beautiful book in conjunction with Anne Champagne, I believe the name of the lady was at the time, and it had wonderful photographs in it of, well, horrific photographs, if I remember correctly, of the clear cuts, but also beautiful photographs of some of the protesters. And subsequently, he's become, since the death of my late father, I'm not much of a comedian, this is serious business here now, I'm looking you right in the eye, Ron. He's subsequently become, for me, a type of spiritual political mentor. I admire his fiscal conservatism. We joke about it, but it's a real thing that has to be applied, I believe, in the political realm. Otherwise, politicians have a tendency to run amok and go, spending irresponsibly on grandiose schemes. Ron is a fiscal conservative. He's an old Scot. I have Scottish blood on my mother's side in the Turnbull clan. And so I understand that fiscal conservatism, and I appreciate it. It's a real thing that needs to be applied, particularly now when we've got an insane government that wants to spend money on the Olympics and building highways and clear-cut logging, etc., while ignoring the poorest of the poor. So thanks, Ron, for helping me to stay focused, and I really do love you as my new father on this year. Thank you.
I think Dad's middle name might be Ron Gadfly Macisaac. And he's got a lot more kids than I realized. And Dad, I wanted to say you've come a long way, baby, because from your clear-cutting teens to your clockwork 60s or 70s, well done, Dad. Anyone else like to come up and speak before we go on to our final medley? All right. So I'd like to call Eric, Colette, Celine, Clarice, Kathleen, Hugh, Carol, Melanie, Dan, Nicola, and anybody else who feels that these songs from the Green Mountain days have an emotional thing to say to us. Okay, here we go. were applauding for so long. We'd like you all to join in on singing that favorite song, Ron Macisaac, and you all have to sing it whether you know the words or not, but we know you do. Home on the Range. Oh, give me a home where the buffaloes roam, and the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a disparaging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day. Okay, sopranos and tenors only. Where the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all of the hour, the guy who has nothing under his kilt.
Well, thank you folks for coming out to celebrate my birthday. It's very nice that my offspring have shown such ingenuity at giving such a varied concert. My reputation as the mayoralty candidate for Victoria, as mentioned, has been always high in the environmental and clear cutting field, and it has been destroyed by my lives in shambles. However, I hope to claw my way back up over the next 20 years and get back to being known as an environmentalist again. So I'll close with a joke. This woman went into the drugstore and she asked for some arsenic. And the pharmacist said, "What do you want it for?" And she said, "I want it to poison my husband." So he said, "Well, I don't think I can give you that, madam." He pulled out a photograph of her husband locked in the arms of the druggist's wife. And he looked at it, he said, "Ah, you have a prescription."
Thank you, Ron. And please stay and he's a jolly good fellow, which nobody can deny, which nobody can deny.